So let's learn how to solve quadratic equations using a method called completing the square. Let's say you were asked to solve the equation x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0 by factoring. So I do the typical, I'm going to multiply a times c, so 1 times negative 5, which is going to give me a negative 5. I need to then find the factors of negative 5. And there's only two options since it's close to a prime number. And remember those pairs, one of those pairs has to add to this middle term of negative 6x. So do any of these pairs add to negative 6? Absolutely not, right? What that means is this quadratic equation can't be factored. And that's going to be a problem for us, right? Since I was asked to solve it by factoring. Well, what that means is there's got to be another way to solve a quadratic equation when I can't factor it. Factoring is the simplest of all the ways to solve a quadratic, but it's not always possible. So in comes a method called completing the square. You're going to want to take some really good notes today so that you'll have some examples to look at when it's your turn to try this. Completing the square means that we're going to turn the main part of the equation, or the left-hand side, into a perfect square. Then I'm going to use square roots to help me solve it. So let's take a look. First of all, remember that quadratic equations needs to be in standard form, or needs to be, anyway. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is standard form for a quadratic equation. My squared term must be first, my x term next, my constant third, and it always equals 0. Then I need to be able to identify which number is a, which number is b, and which number is c, especially because my instructions are going to be in terms of a's, b's, and c's. In this case, a is 1 even though you can't see it. B is negative 6 and C is negative 5. First thing we're going to do is take C to the other side. I know that sounds a little funny, but trust me, this is going to work. I'm going to do that by adding 5 to both sides so that I only have my x terms on the left and now my constants on the right. I'm going to turn the left-hand side of my equation into a perfect square by adding b divided by 2 all squared to both sides. Now since b was negative 6, that's the number I'm going to divide by 2. So I'm going to take negative 6 divided by 2 and then square it, and that's going to turn my left-hand side into a perfect square. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. When I square that, that means negative 3 times negative 3, which means that I'm adding 9 to both sides. That's b divided by 2, then I square that number. On the left-hand side, the reason that that's called a perfect square now is because when I factor that, I get x minus 3 times x minus 3, or I can call that x minus 3 quantity squared. My right-hand side, 5 plus 9, gives me 14. The right-hand side is not always going to be a perfect square. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It's okay either way. But now the left-hand side will always be a perfect square. Next, I'm going to square root both sides, right? Once you have your squared term isolated, you can square root. So when I square root both sides, remember on the left-hand side, square rooting a squared just simply gets rid of the squared. And the square root of 14 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to leave it as square root of 14. But remember, when I take the square root of a number, I need to consider both the positive and negative root. So I'm going to call this positive and negative square root of 14. The last thing we're going to do is isolate x, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides so that x can be by itself, and that's going to look like x equals 3 plus or minus root of 14. I actually have two different answers here. I have 3 plus the square root of 14 and 3 minus the square root of 14. If I had a calculator handy, I could turn that into two decimal answers, but they're not going to be nice decimals. I'm going to have to round them. So sometimes it's better just to leave it like this. Let's try another one so that you can see again how this kind of comes together. So first of all, I kind of have this in standard form. I have my x squared term first, my x term in the middle, my constant third. It doesn't equal 0, but in completing the square, that's not always going to be super important. I could subtract the 4 over to the left and make this a 12. It's going to work out either way. Make sure it's in the right order, of course, right? Squared, x, constant. Make sure that it's in that descending order before you even start. Subtract c from both sides. So I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides so that my two x terms are alone. And now I have negative 12 on the right-hand side. Add b divided by 2, all squared, to both sides. So b in this case is negative 8. That's always going to be our coefficient on our regular x term. So that's the number I'm going to divide by 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. When I square that, that's going to be negative 4 times negative 4, which is going to give me 16. So when I add 16 to both sides, then I'm going to simplify this and write it as a square. What I mean by that is take what's on the left now and factor it. That's going to give me x minus 4 times x minus 4, which can be written as x minus 4 quantity squared. On the right-hand side, negative 12 plus 16 turns into a 4 when I combine my like terms. Now this is what we call, or at least the left-hand side is what we call a perfect square. And that's why this is called completing the square, because I'm going to do what it takes to make this a perfect square. Look back up here at the number that I was going to square. Remember our b divided by 2? Look how that gave me a negative 4. And look what number is in both sets of parentheses. Negative 4 and negative 4, right? That's going to help you factor this really quickly, I think. Now that I have my squared term, I can square root both sides. On the left, it's just going to get rid of the squared, and on the right, it's going to give me a positive and negative number. When I add 4 to both sides to isolate x, I get x equals 4 plus or minus 2. I have two equations there, two solutions. One is 4 plus 2 and one is 4 minus 2. 4 plus 2 gives me 6, 4 minus 2 gives me 2, and those are my two solutions. Let's try one more. A quick thing that you need to know, please make sure that this gets in your notes. A must be 1 for completing the square to work. A, which remember is our coefficient in front of the x squared, must be 1 for completing the square to work. So to make this 5 become a 1, I need to divide everything by 5. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Remember to divide everything by 5 or else this won't work out. 5 divided by 5 gives me 1x squared. Negative 50 divided by 5 gives me a negative 10x. And negative 120 divided by 5 leaves me with a negative 24. And fortunately, 0 divided by 5 is still 0. So now I have a quadratic equation that I can solve by completing the square. So now I have it in the right order. I'm going to subtract c from both sides, or in this case add. To get rid of a negative 24, I need to add 24. What's b in this scenario? b is always the coefficient in front of x, so in this case negative 10. So that's the number I'm going to divide by 2 and then square. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And negative 5 squared, negative 5 times negative 5, is positive 25. Then I factor and write it as a square. Notice what b divided by 2 was. That was a minus 5 or negative 5, and that's what's going to go in both parentheses. Now I can square root both sides. Remember, when I square root on the right hand side, I need to take the positive and negative root. When I add 5 to both sides to isolate x, I get x is 5 plus or minus 7. Remember, that's two solutions, one with 5 plus 7 and one with 5 minus 7. And that's going to give me my two solutions of 12 and negative 2. I know this looks really complicated. The more that you do it, the easier it's going to be for you. Please make sure that you have some examples written down and the steps that I've been writing on the side of the screen. Write down any questions that you have so we can go over them in class. And don't forget to take the online quiz. Have a great day, and I'll see you later.